It started like any other quiet night on Earth. Scientists at the Deep Space Listening Station in Chile were doing their regular work, scanning endless space for any signs of intelligent life. Most of the time, the sounds they caught were nothing more than radio noise, dying stars, or the faint hum of the universe itself. But that night, something different arrived. A strange pattern of sounds repeated over and over again, filled with structure and rhythm that couldn't be random. At first, they thought it was an error or interference from satellites. Yet as they checked the data again, the realization began to form. This was not from Earth. The team worked through the night translating the frequencies into sound. What they heard wasn't music or mechanical beeps, it was a cry. A real emotional, desperate cry. It was as if someone far away was pleading for help. The team was speechless. When they sent the data to other observatories, confirmations began flooding in from Australia, Japan, and the United States. The message was genuine. It was coming from a star system over 200 light-years away. The world's scientific community entered a frenzy. Governments demanded answers, and soon, what began as a quiet discovery turned into the most important moment in human history. For weeks, the world watched as linguists, mathematicians, and AI systems tried to break the message's code. Slowly, words began to appear in translation, broken but understandable. The message said, "We are the Valkyrie. Our world is dying. We beg for aid." The message described a civilization on the edge of collapse, their planet under attack by an enemy called the Tsareth Dominion. They spoke of fire from the sky, of oceans boiling, of cities torn apart by unstoppable machines. They said they had heard stories about Earth, about a species that survived anything, even its own wars. To them, humans were not just another life form, they were a legend, a hope. They said Earth was known across the stars as a death world, a planet so harsh that only the strongest could thrive. The Valkyrie believed that if anyone could help them, it would be the people of Earth. When the message was broadcast to the public, the world reacted in shock and disbelief. Some believed it instantly. Others thought it was a hoax or a trap. News channels ran 24-hour coverage. Social media exploded with arguments. Some said humanity had no business getting involved in alien wars. Others felt a moral duty to help, even if it meant risking everything. Religious leaders called it a test of compassion. Scientists called it a chance to prove humanity's maturity. Everywhere, people asked the same question. Should Earth answer the call? In the White House, the UN, and other global councils, debates grew fierce. Generals worried about danger. Economists warned about cost. But the images sent by the Valkyrie told a different story. They showed a dying world, a world that had cities as beautiful as Earth's, oceans turning red, and skies filled with burning ships. The aliens looked surprisingly familiar, tall, thin, with eyes that seemed human in their fear. Their pleas were not made in arrogance or deceit. They were begging like children calling for help in the dark. Slowly, the fear began to turn into empathy. Across Earth, something began to shift. Artists painted the Valkyrie. Children sent recorded messages saying they wanted to help. Ordinary people raised funds, built online campaigns, and lit candles in memory of the unknown lives lost on another planet. Humanity, which had spent centuries fighting itself, suddenly began to unite for someone else. There was doubt, but there was also hope. For the first time, people started to believe that maybe Earth could be something greater than its wars and greed. Maybe it could be a protector. At NASA's Advanced Communication Hub, scientists worked day and night to send a response back to the source. It took days to finalize. The message was simple but powerful. We have heard you. You are not alone. The moment the message was confirmed as sent, the whole world held its breath. For weeks, there was silence. Then faintly, another signal came through. It was the Valkyrie again. This time, their message carried tears of relief. They said they never thought humanity would respond. They sent coordinates of their system and begged for physical aid, medical help, food defense, anything to survive. That night, as the world's leaders watched the decoded message, they realized this was no longer about curiosity or science. It was about life. Earth had been given a choice. Ignore the cry and remain safe, or act and risk entering an unknown galactic conflict. The choice weighed heavily on every leader's shoulders. But deep down, humans had always been creatures of action. They had never turned away from a challenge, no matter the danger. In military academies, officers whispered about the situation. Some called it madness to get involved. Others said this was destiny. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers offered to volunteer for what would be the first interstellar aid mission in history. Technology that was once used to fight human wars was now being redesigned for space travel. Within secret hangars and orbital stations, engineers worked on new ships capable of deep space jumps. Nations shared their resources for the first time in decades. The mission was not about conquest, it was about compassion. Meanwhile, on the streets, people looked at the stars differently. The night sky no longer felt distant. Somewhere out there, another civilization was waiting. Terrified, hoping that humans would come. Families prayed for the aliens' safety. Scientists felt the weight of history pressing on them. Musicians wrote songs about the cry from the stars, and poets compared it to the first time a lost child called for its mother. It was as if the whole planet had suddenly remembered what it meant to care for someone beyond themselves. But not everyone believed in the goodness of this act. Some groups protested, saying humans should fix Earth's problems first before saving others. They warned that the message could be a trap, a way for an alien power to lure Earth's defenses into a war. Intelligence agencies investigated every angle, scanning the signal for hidden data or military codes. Yet no matter how many times they checked, the message stayed the same, genuine, sorrowful, and full of fear. In the end, the truth was undeniable. Someone out there needed help. Weeks turned into months as discussions continued. The tension grew. Every nation had something to say, but the decision could not wait forever. One cold morning, the United Earth Alliance held a final secret meeting. After hours of silence and heated arguments, they voted. The result was clear. Earth would respond. Humanity would go to their aid. That day, the world changed forever. News of the decision spread like wildfire. Crowds filled the streets, cheering, crying, and waving flags not of countries, but of Earth itself. For the first time, humanity was united under one identity, not as Americans, Chinese, or Europeans, but as humans of Earth. The phrase, "we will go," echoed across every screen. Journalists called it the dawn of the Deathworlders. No one knew what awaited them beyond the stars, but everyone knew this was a moment that would define who they were. As engineers worked on the ships and soldiers trained for an unknown enemy, one thought remained in the minds of all. This was no longer about exploration or discovery. This was about compassion and courage. Somewhere far away, the Valkyrie waited, still afraid, still holding on to the hope that their saviors would come. On Earth, millions of eyes turned to the night sky, knowing that the first step toward the stars had been taken not out of greed or conquest, but out of something deeply human, the desire to help those in need. And though no one could predict what would come next, one truth was clear: humanity had answered the call. The universe had cried for help and Earth had listened. In the days following Earth's decision to help the Valkyrie, the whole planet changed. It was as if humanity had suddenly awakened from a long sleep. Old rivalries faded, political tensions softened, and for the first time, countries began to act like pieces of one great family. The United Earth Alliance, which once existed mostly in name, now became real. In huge meeting halls filled with flags of every nation, leaders gathered under one purpose: to prepare humanity for something it had never done before: go to war for another world. The Council Chamber in Geneva became the beating heart of this new mission. Scientists, military generals, diplomats, and engineers from every continent sat around the same table. There were no longer seats labeled by country. Everyone wore the same symbol, the blue and white emblem of Earth. Every discussion began with one thought: if Earth was going to help, it had to do it right. The Valkyrie had sent them data about the Tsareth Dominion, their enemy. When human analysts saw the information, they were stunned. The Dominion was a massive interstellar power that ruled dozens of star systems. Their ships were large, their weapons advanced, and their cruelty beyond imagination. The Valkyrie had been fighting them for years and were close to extinction. For many, this information sparked fear. Earth had only just begun space exploration. Its farthest manned mission barely reached Mars. How could humans fight an empire that spanned galaxies? But even with this fear, there was a burning determination inside the hearts of those in the room. Humanity had faced impossible odds before: disease, wars, famine, and extinction-level events. Every time it had survived. Now they would do it again. Meetings turned into action plans. Nations opened their research facilities. sharing their most advanced technologies. American aerospace experts worked side by side with Russian engineers. Chinese scientists exchanged knowledge with European space agencies, and private corporations joined to build faster engines and stronger weapons. New alloys were created to survive interstellar pressure. Artificial intelligence was upgraded to manage long-range combat and navigation. Every human talent, from builders to programmers, was called to serve. Meanwhile, the military prepared for something no soldier in history had trained for: fighting in space. Thousands of soldiers volunteered, knowing they might never return. Training centers were established on the Moon and Mars to prepare troops for zero-gravity combat. There were simulations of alien environments, tests of strength and endurance, and experiments to understand how human bodies could survive in other atmospheres. Many of these volunteers were young, men and women who grew up watching science fiction movies, now living the real thing. Despite all the excitement, there was a heavy silence that followed every success. They all knew this was not just an adventure. It was war. The Valkyrie's latest transmissions showed that their cities were falling faster than expected. Their oceans were being poisoned. Their skies burned red. They begged Earth to hurry. In one message, a Valkyrie child looked into the camera and said, "Please come soon. My brother is gone." That one moment broke every heart on Earth. It made the mission no longer a choice, it was a duty. In the middle of the planning, a great question arose. Who would command the mission? Many leaders suggested their best generals, but in the end, the council chose Admiral Elias Reiner, a calm, strategic man known for his sense of justice. He wasn't the loudest or most aggressive, but he was respected across nations. Reiner accepted the role with quiet determination. He said, "We are not going to conquer. We are going to protect. That must never be forgotten." His words became the motto of the mission. Under Reiner's leadership, the project took the name Operation Dawnstar. It symbolized hope, a light in the darkest corner of the universe. Thousands of ships were being prepared in Earth's orbit. Some carried weapons, others medical supplies and food. There were scientists, engineers, and diplomats among the crews. Every ship was marked with a glowing emblem of Earth, like a promise that humanity was coming. But not everyone supported the mission. There were groups that believed Earth was rushing into a trap. They warned that humans knew nothing about the true nature of these aliens or their enemies. Some even claimed the Valkyrie could be lying to draw humans into their war. In cities around the world, protests erupted. People carried signs that said, "Fix Earth first and not our war." But even as protests grew, more people volunteered every day. The sense of unity was stronger than the fear. Inside laboratories, scientists worked day and night to solve one of the biggest problems: how to travel 200 light-years quickly. Conventional engines would take centuries. That was when Dr. Mei Lian, a physicist from Beijing, made a breakthrough. She and her team managed to adapt a theoretical warp drive model into a functional system using quantum tunneling. It wasn't perfect, but it could cut the journey from centuries to months. Her discovery changed everything. The warp system was installed on the lead ships, turning science fiction into reality. As the launch date grew closer, tension spread through every control center. Families said emotional goodbyes to their loved ones. Some recorded farewell messages just in case they never returned. On television, reporters spoke of the mission as the gamble of humanity. Yet even the most doubtful voices couldn't ignore the pride that filled the air. For the first time in history, the world wasn't divided by borders. It was united by purpose. The United Earth Council held one final session before launch. The room was silent as Admiral Reiner stood to speak. He looked at the holographic image of the Valkyrie homeworld projected before them, once green and bright, now covered in smoke. "They called for help," he said. "We will answer. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as allies. The universe will know that Earth does not abandon those in need." His words were simple, but they echoed with power. Every person in the chamber stood and applauded. In that moment, humanity felt unstoppable. The day of the launch arrived. The world watched as massive starships rose into orbit, their engines glowing like new suns. Crowds filled the streets, cheering and crying as they looked up at the sky. School children waved flags. Scientists hugged each other, and parents held their children tight, whispering prayers for those who were leaving. Cameras broadcasted the event live across the planet. The sound of countdowns echoed through every home. When the engines ignited and the ships broke through the atmosphere, the world cheered louder than it ever had. From space, Earth looked small and fragile, a blue jewel hanging in the blackness. Admiral Reiner stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity and looked down at his home planet. For a moment he wondered if they were ready, but then he remembered the faces of the Valkyrie, the cries for help and the hope that had united billions of humans. He gave the order, "Engage warp." The stars outside stretched into brilliant lines of light, and in an instant, the fleet vanished into the depths of space. The mission had begun. Back on Earth, the silence that followed felt heavy. People stared at the sky, knowing that somewhere far beyond what their eyes could see, their own kind were racing through the void to save strangers. Governments established communication centers to track the fleet. Every day, news updates came in about their progress. Every few weeks, messages from the ships arrived, short reports, small victories, and sometimes just simple words like, "We're still here." Months passed. The Earth learned to wait, to hope, and to fear. But through it all, one truth remained. Humanity had done something extraordinary. It had chosen compassion over safety, courage over comfort. And though they did not yet know it, this act of mercy, the decision to help the Valkyrie, would forever change the balance of the universe. For in answering that desperate call, Earth had awakened something it didn't fully understand, its own legend as the Deathworlders. When the human fleet reached the Valkyrie system after months of travel through deep space, they were not prepared for what they saw. The moment they exited warp, the stars outside their ships were no longer calm and silent. They were on fire. The Valkyrie homeworld was under full attack. From orbit, Earth's crews could see explosions lighting up the surface like storms of red lightning. Whole cities were burning. Giant ships belonging to the Tsareth Dominion circled the planet like vultures, dropping fire down from orbit. The airwaves were filled with distress signals, screams, and chaos. It was a nightmare. Admiral Elias Reiner stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, staring at the planet below. His crew was silent. None of them had ever seen destruction on such a scale. He clenched his fists, knowing there was no time to wait or think. This was what they had come for. All ships, he commanded, activate combat protocols. Protect the Valkyrie, engage the Dominion immediately. His voice echoed through every ship in the fleet, and within seconds Earth's war machine came to life. The human fleet had been preparing for months, but no simulation could compare to real battle. Hundreds of sleek human vessels, built from the best technology Earth could create, moved into formation. The enemy noticed them quickly. The Dominion ships, dark and angular, turned their massive weapons toward the newcomers. They were confident. They had crushed dozens of civilizations before, and saw humans as nothing more than another fragile species daring to interfere. The first exchange of fire came swift and brutal. Energy blasts streaked across space, tearing through the darkness. Human ships dodged and countered, firing kinetic rounds, massive projectiles that hit with devastating force. Unlike other alien races, humans didn't rely only on energy weapons. They had learned through centuries of warfare that sometimes simple things were deadliest. The Dominion expected laser duels. Instead, they were hit by solid metal shells traveling faster than sound, piercing their shields and hulls. In minutes, several enemy cruisers exploded in fiery bursts. The Valkyrie, who were still alive on the surface, watched from their shattered cities as streaks of light filled their sky. At first, they thought the end had come. Then they saw strange new ships with Earth's blue and white symbols. Hope flickered for the first time in years. Inside the Unity, the bridge shook from near misses. Officers shouted updates, engineers rerouted power to shields, and medics prepared for casualties. Reiner stayed calm, his voice steady, guiding the fleet like a conductor leading an orchestra of war. "Focus on the carrier group," he ordered. "Break their formation." Human ships dove through the chaos, moving faster and more unpredictably than the Dominion expected. The aliens were used to disciplined formations. But humans fought differently. They adapted instantly. In space combat, humans used what they called swarm tactics. Dozens of small ships surrounded larger enemy vessels, attacking from multiple angles. The Dominion ships couldn't keep up. They were built for straightforward battles, not this kind of chaotic aggression. Within hours, the balance began to shift. One by one, the enemy ships fell back. But victory wasn't without cost. Several human ships were destroyed in the first assault, their crews lost forever in the void. When one of the smaller vessels, Vanguard 3, was hit, the crew's final message came through the comms. "Tell Earth, we did it." Then their signal vanished. Those words spread through the fleet like fire, filling every soldier with determination. As the Dominion retreated from orbit, human dropships began their descent to the planet's surface. The Valkyrie cities were in ruins, skyscrapers reduced to molten skeletons, forests turned to ash. Human troops landed amidst smoke and debris. They wore advanced armor designed to protect them from radiation and toxins. As they stepped out, they saw Valkyrie survivors, thin, weak, terrified, hiding in underground tunnels. When they saw the humans, they hesitated, unsure if these new warriors were friend or foe. A young Valkyrie woman approached a group of soldiers cautiously. Her eyes were filled with tears. One of the human soldiers removed his helmet and smiled softly, saying, "You're safe now." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. For the first time in years, she felt something she had forgotten: hope. Human engineers set up medical tents and emergency shelters within hours. Doctors treated alien wounds, and translators worked day and night to communicate with the survivors. The Valkyrie leaders met Admiral Reiner and thanked him, their voices shaking. "We thought we were alone," one of them said. Reiner replied, "No one is alone anymore," but the fight was far from over. While Earth's fleet had won the first battle, the Dominion regrouped. Their pride was wounded and they sent reinforcements. Within days, new enemy ships appeared at the edge of the system, larger, more heavily armed. Reiner knew what was coming. Humanity's true test was about to begin. When the Dominion returned, they were furious. Their fleet stretched across the stars, blocking the light of the sun. The Valkyrie thought this was the end again, but the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they prepared for the biggest battle humanity had ever fought. The skies above the Valkyrie world turned into a war zone. Human pilots became legends that day. They moved their ships in ways the Dominion had never seen, cutting engines mid-flight, spinning and firing backward to destroy pursuing fighters. Earth's AI systems coordinated thousands of attacks at once, predicting enemy moves before they happened. It wasn't clean or organized, it was pure chaos, the kind humans thrived in. In the middle of the battle, something extraordinary happened. The Dominion's command ship, a massive fortress called the Obsidian Spear, targeted the planet's surface, preparing to wipe out the Valkyrie completely. Reiner couldn't allow it. He ordered every human ship to focus fire on the fortress. The fleet obeyed, launching a storm of missiles and railgun rounds. The sky lit up brighter than any sunrise. The fortress resisted at first, its shields glowing white, but humanity didn't stop. They kept firing until the shields cracked. Then with one final blast from the Unity, the fortress exploded. The shockwave rippled through space, scattering debris for miles. The Dominion ships, leaderless and broken, began to retreat. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated a galactic superpower in their first true battle. The Valkyrie watched from the ground as the enemy ships burned in the atmosphere, their wreckage falling like fiery rain. They cheered, cried, and sang songs of gratitude. For them, it was a miracle. For the humans, it was just the beginning. In the aftermath, Reiner stood before his exhausted crew. Many were injured, some were gone, but they had achieved what no one thought possible. He said quietly, "You've shown the galaxy what humanity can do when it stands for what's right." The crew didn't cheer. They were too tired for that, but their eyes glowed with pride. News of the victory spread quickly across the galaxy. Other alien civilizations, long terrified of the Dominion, began to whisper the same name, Earth. They spoke of humans as unstoppable, unpredictable warriors, creatures from a death world who fought like storms and never surrendered. To some, they were heroes. To others, monsters. Down on the surface, the Valkyrie rebuilt their cities with human help. The two species worked together, sharing technology and culture. Children of both races played side by side in the ruins of old battlefields. Yet even in peace there was unease. Some Valkyrie began to fear the same power that had saved them. They saw the humans' efficiency in war, their emotionless precision, and wondered what would happen if Earth ever turned that power against others. But for now, there was relief. The skies were clear again. The fires had died out. The Valkyrie could finally breathe. At night, Admiral Reiner stood on a balcony overlooking the alien capital, now slowly being rebuilt. He looked up at the stars, his face calm but heavy. He knew this victory had changed everything. The universe had seen humanity's strength, and humanity itself had seen what it was capable of. Earth had come to help, but in doing so, it had revealed something that could never be hidden again: its true nature. The galaxy now knew that the people of Earth were not fragile or fearful. They were Deathworlders, and when they fought, the universe trembled. The battle for the Valkyrie system was far from over. Even after the destruction of the Dominion's flagship, the Tsirath forces were not finished. Reinforcements arrived from nearby star systems, larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had seen before. For Earth's fleet, this was the real test. It was one thing to defeat a single enemy formation. It was another to face a relentless, massive armada determined to wipe out everything in its path. Admiral Reiner understood the stakes. Failure was not an option. If humanity failed, the Valkyrie civilization would be destroyed, and Earth's intervention would be remembered as a reckless gamble instead of a salvation. Human ships had already proven their skill in combat, but now they faced a different kind of challenge. The Dominion's new forces were highly organized, moving in coordinated waves using advanced tactics the humans had never encountered. They deployed swarms of small, agile fighters to harass human lines, while their larger cruisers rained energy blasts on the planet's surface. The humans could not rely on brute force alone. They had to adapt, and fast. Reiner called a council of his top officers. "We can't fight them like they expect," he said. "We need to become unpredictable. We need to learn faster than they do, and strike where they least expect." His words were simple but carried the weight of experience. The officers nodded, knowing that human creativity and adaptability had been what saved them before, and it would have to do so again. The first step was to change the way humans fought in space. They split their forces into smaller, more flexible units. Each unit could operate independently, using guerrilla tactics to strike, vanish, and reappear from unexpected angles. AI systems were upgraded to predict Dominion movements, allowing humans to set traps in space where enemy ships would find themselves surrounded or funneled into kill zones. It was risky, but humans had learned long ago that risks were necessary for survival. As the new battles began, the Dominion was shocked. Their well-ordered formations were disrupted by the unpredictable human maneuvers. Ships that had once felt invincible were now destroyed by small teams of Earth pilots executing daring attacks. In asteroid fields, human ships dodged through debris while luring enemy cruisers into collisions. In open space, they used decoy drones to trick the Dominion into firing at empty targets while human ships struck from behind. Every battle was intense, terrifying, and unlike anything the humans or the Dominion had experienced before. On the surface of the Valkyrie planet, life was slowly returning. Human engineers and Valkyrie workers repaired buildings, restored communication networks, and rebuilt hospitals. Survivors were treated for injuries, given food, and taught how to handle human technology. For the Valkyrie, the humans were both saviors and a mystery. They fought with precision and ferocity that no one could match. Yet they also showed compassion, rescuing children from rubble, administering care to the sick, and sharing their technology without expecting anything in return. But the victories came at a cost. Many human soldiers and engineers were lost in these battles. Ships were destroyed, leaving debris floating in the system. Each casualty was felt deeply by the crews, and yet they continued. The more they saw the suffering of the Valkyrie, the more determined they became. Reiner often walked among his crews, offering quiet words of encouragement. He reminded them that every sacrifice was saving lives, that humanity had a duty to protect those who could not defend themselves. Even amidst victory, fear lingered. The Dominion's forces were enormous, and their strategy was evolving. New weapons appeared that the humans had never seen before: plasma cannons capable of piercing reinforced shields, drones that could disrupt ship navigation, and orbital mines that threatened entire fleets. Every engagement required ingenuity, split-second decision-making, and courage beyond measure. Many crews discovered the limits of human endurance. Exhaustion became common, but no one gave up. They knew that stopping meant doom for everyone below. During one battle near the outer rim of the Valkyrie system, a squadron of human fighters was ambushed. The Dominion's elite units surrounded them, cutting off escape. It seemed hopeless. But the pilots remembered Reiner's words: adapt, strike unexpectedly, survive. Using the planet's asteroid belt as cover, they executed maneuvers no training simulation had prepared them for. They feigned retreat, then attacked from behind. In minutes, the enemy elite units were destroyed, and the remaining forces fled. The victory spread through the fleet as proof that human creativity and courage could overcome even the deadliest threats. Meanwhile, the Valkyrie began to observe humanity differently. At first, they were grateful for their lives. Then, as the humans continued to fight with relentless efficiency, whispers of fear began. Some began to wonder, could the same species that saved them also become a threat if provoked? The humans did not hesitate to destroy any enemy in their path, and the Dominion's destruction was complete and total. For the Valkyrie, it was awe-inspiring and terrifying. They had witnessed the full extent of human war power, and it was unlike anything they had ever imagined. Despite the fear, trust began to grow between the two species. Human medics treated Valkyrie soldiers and civilians alike. Engineers taught them how to repair ships and weapons. Children learned human games, and cultural exchange flourished even amidst the war. Humans showed that while they could be merciless in combat, they could also be compassionate, clever, and understanding. The two species began to form bonds that no battlefield could break. As weeks turned into months, the Dominion's presence in the system weakened. They had suffered too many losses, and their attempts to reinforce their fleet had been repeatedly foiled by human tactics. The humans, however, were also changing. They had become more efficient, more decisive, and even more feared. Rumors began spreading in distant systems that Earth's forces were unstoppable, that no army could outmatch them. Humanity's reputation as Deathworlders, the name given for their ability to thrive and survive under extreme conditions, was beginning to spread across the galaxy. Even in these moments of triumph, Reiner remained cautious. He knew the Dominion might return with even larger forces. He also understood the weight of what humanity was becoming. The Valkyrie needed their protection, but the galaxy had now seen what humans could do. Some civilizations might welcome them, others might fear them. Every action taken in the Valkyrie system was a message to the rest of the universe. Earth was powerful, resourceful, and willing to fight to protect life. On the ground, human soldiers were becoming legends. Tales spread of squads that had rescued hundreds of Valkyrie civilians, of medics who treated patients in the middle of battle, and engineers who rebuilt destroyed bridges in days. The humans' presence had transformed the planet, but it had also reshaped the Valkyrie themselves. They began to adopt Earth technology, learn human strategies, and even reconsider their approach to warfare. For them, humanity was a teacher as well as a savior. Despite these successes, the human crews were haunted by what they had seen. Cities had been destroyed, lives lost, and entire ecosystems altered. Each soldier carried the memory of the dead, and many spent nights thinking about the consequences of their power. Some wondered if humanity's strength could one day become a danger to others, if the very skill that had saved the Valkyrie might be used against a civilization less fortunate. These thoughts were difficult, but they strengthened the resolve of leaders and crews alike. They fought not only to save lives, but to ensure that their actions remained just. As the war reached a temporary calm, humans took the time to repair, refuel, and strategize. They studied the Dominion's remaining fleets, learning their weaknesses and preparing for the inevitable return. Even in rest, they trained, tested, and improved. Every day was a preparation for the challenges that lay ahead. They had learned that victory was never permanent, and that survival required constant vigilance, intelligence, and courage. Through all this, one thing remained constant: humanity's willingness to act when others could not. The Valkyrie were alive because of humans. Their cities, though damaged, were rebuilding. Their children played again. Their culture and science were being restored. Humanity had arrived as rescuers, but in doing so, they had reshaped the Valkyrie civilization forever. At night, Reiner would often look out at the stars from the bridge of the Unity. He saw the lights of human and Valkyrie ships shining together, moving in synchronized patterns, ready for anything the Dominion might throw at them next. He knew the battles were far from over, but he also knew that humanity had changed the course of this war. They were not just visitors, they were protectors, warriors, and legends. The galaxy had begun to notice. Reports came from neighboring systems of humans fighting Dominion forces, often against impossible odds and winning. Civilizations that had once thought the Dominion unstoppable now whispered about the Deathworlders of Earth. Some feared them, some admired them, but all knew one thing: humanity had arrived, and it was unlike anything the universe had seen before. In the Valkyrie system, peace was fragile, but hope was strong. Humans had shown that even the most desperate situation could be turned around. They had proven that intelligence, courage, and creativity could defeat even the most powerful forces. The Valkyrie had been saved, their civilization preserved, and yet the humans had grown in power and reputation. And so the struggle continued, not just against the Dominion but within humanity itself. They had the power to protect, but they also carried the weight of that power. Every decision, every battle, and every life saved or lost shaped the kind of force they were becoming. The Deathworlders had awakened, and the galaxy would never forget them. Humanity had survived impossible odds before, and now they were teaching the universe how survival could be an art form, a mixture of strategy, courage, and an unyielding will to protect life, no matter the danger. The turning tide of the war was not just about ships or weapons. It was about showing that even in the darkest of times, hope and skill could change everything. After months of relentless fighting, the war in the Valkyrie system finally reached a decisive point. The Tsreth Dominion, though vast and powerful, had suffered continuous defeats. Their fleet had been shattered, their supply lines destroyed, and their morale broken. The Dominion's leaders, once confident that they could crush the Valkyrie with ease, realized they had underestimated the humans. Earth's forces were relentless, adaptive, and terrifyingly effective. The galaxy had never witnessed anything like it, Admiral. Elias Reiner oversaw the final offensive from the bridge of the flagship, Unity. The plan was simple but risky: cut off the Dominion's retreat routes and force them into a corner, where their remaining forces could be destroyed without risking the lives of Valkyrie civilians. Every ship, every pilot, and every soldier had to perform flawlessly. There was no room for error. As the fleet moved into position, communications were alive with updates, calculations, and last-minute adjustments. When the battle began, it was chaos at first. The Dominion deployed its remaining warships, launching volleys of energy blasts and deploying swarms of drones designed to confuse and disrupt. The human fleet responded with a combination of precision and improvisation. Small squads moved independently, striking from angles the Dominion could not anticipate. Heavy cruisers fired long-range projectiles to break enemy formations, while fighters zipped through gaps in defenses to disable key ships. Every maneuver was calculated but executed with the instinct and creativity that only humans possessed. The Dominion's command ship, the massive Obsidian Spear II, attempted to rally its forces and turn the tide. Its weapons were immense, capable of destroying entire planetary sectors. But the humans had learned from earlier battles. They coordinated a multi-pronged attack that targeted the ship's shields, engines, and weapon systems simultaneously. Missiles, railgun projectiles, and focused energy blasts struck in perfect synchronization. For the Dominion commanders, the universe seemed to explode around them as their flagship took hit after hit. Within hours, it was crippled, and their remaining forces scattered in panic. On the surface of the Valkyrie planet, human and Valkyrie teams worked together to evacuate the last pockets of danger. Civilians were transported to newly constructed shelters, and medical teams treated injuries from both the Dominion's attacks and the aftermath of the battles. The human presence was more than military. It was a lifeline. Engineers repaired essential infrastructure, while soldiers assisted in rebuilding homes and stabilizing city districts. Children played amidst the ruins, protected by human patrols, their laughter a sign that life was returning despite the destruction surrounding them. In space, the Dominion's retreat was relentless but doomed. Human ships pursued with precise coordination, cutting off escape routes and neutralizing the enemy one by one. Many Dominion ships surrendered, realizing that continuing to fight was pointless. Others were destroyed, leaving nothing but drifting debris in the void. The humans did not celebrate recklessly. They understood the cost of war. Every life lost was mourned, every victory measured by the lives saved rather than the enemies defeated. When the final Dominion fleet was destroyed, the Valkyrie system entered a fragile peace. The Valkyrie, who had spent years in fear and despair, were finally free. They could rebuild, they could heal, and they could live without the constant threat of annihilation. For them, humans were no longer just allies, they were legends. Survivors told stories of the strange new species that came to save them. Creatures from a harsh, distant world who fought like storms and never retreated. Yet the humans themselves were changed. The battles had tested them in ways no simulation or training could. Pilots, soldiers, and engineers carried scars both physical and emotional. Many had lost comrades, friends who had sacrificed everything for a mission that was bigger than any one life. Still, they stood proud, knowing they had done what many thought impossible. Humanity had entered the galaxy not as conquerors but as protectors, and they had left a mark that would be remembered for generations. Admiral Reiner called a meeting with the surviving Valkyrie leaders to discuss the future. They spoke of rebuilding their civilization, sharing technology, and learning from each other. Reiner emphasized one principle above all: your world is yours. We came to help, not to rule. Remember that. The Valkyrie listened intently, understanding that the humans had not only saved them but had also respected their autonomy. That respect strengthened the bond between the two species, ensuring that trust and friendship would endure long after the war ended. On Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. People across the planet celebrated the bravery and ingenuity of the human fleet. The images of ships moving through the Valkyrie skies, of soldiers rescuing civilians amidst chaos, and of the final triumph against the Dominion captured the imagination of billions. Humanity had proven that even against the most overwhelming odds, it could act decisively, strategically, and morally. The age of Earth's influence in the galaxy had begun, and the term Deathworlders became widely known, not as a warning, but as a symbol of humanity's resilience, creativity, and courage. Despite the celebration, there were lessons to be learned. The humans who had fought in the Valkyrie system understood the responsibility that came with power. They had witnessed firsthand the destruction their presence could bring, even when intended for good. This awareness shaped future decisions, ensuring that Earth's involvement in the galaxy would always consider both moral and strategic consequences. Humanity had immense power, and it had to be wielded wisely. Back in the Valkyrie system, reconstruction efforts continued. Humans stayed long enough to provide training, rebuild essential infrastructure, and ensure that the Valkyrie could defend themselves if another threat arose. Hospitals were rebuilt with advanced technology, communication networks restored, and schools reopened. Young Valkyrie students learned alongside humans, studying mathematics, engineering, and science in ways their civilization had never experienced before. The partnership between the two species created a foundation for long-term cooperation and cultural exchange. As months passed, Earth's fleet began to return home. Ships departed the Valkyrie system, leaving behind a civilization that was stronger, wiser, and more hopeful. Yet even as humans returned to Earth, the galaxy had taken notice. Neighboring star systems, which had long feared the Dominion, now watched with cautious admiration and, in some cases, apprehension. Humans had demonstrated a unique combination of ingenuity, adaptability, and moral resolve. Word spread quickly. The species from Earth was not only capable of surviving the harshest conditions, but it could also project power, protect others, and change the balance of the galaxy. For the Valkyrie, the humans became a symbol of hope and transformation. Monuments were erected to honor the sacrifices of those who had come from Earth, and stories of the Deathworlders were passed down to future generations. The Valkyrie had been saved, yes, but they had also been transformed by humanity's presence. Their culture, science, and society were evolving rapidly, guided in part by what they had learned from their saviors. Meanwhile, humans returned to a world that had watched and waited. They were heroes, yes, but they were also changed. Many could not speak of what they had seen or done, carrying memories that were too intense to share fully. Yet there was pride, camaraderie, and a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity had not only saved a civilization, but had also proven that it could operate on a galactic scale, balancing strength with compassion. Admiral Reiner looked out from the bridge of the Unity as Earth grew larger in the viewport. The stars stretched behind them, and for a moment the universe felt both vast and intimate. They had completed a mission that had seemed impossible, Yet in doing so, they had awakened a new understanding of what humanity could achieve. Across the galaxy, civilizations now whispered the name of Earth with a mixture of respect and caution. The aftermath of the war was a mixture of relief and reflection. On the Valkyrie homeworld, families reunited, children left again, and cities began to rise from the ashes. Humans left behind technology, knowledge, and the example of what it meant to fight for life without seeking conquest. For the first time in history, a species from Earth had fought in a galactic war not for domination, but for survival and protection. Across the universe, the legacy of the Deathworlders was cemented. The Tsureth Dominion had been defeated, but more importantly, the story of humans, resourceful, resilient, and morally steadfast, was now known. Allies looked to Earth for leadership. Enemies reconsidered their assumptions, and the Valkyrie, once a civilization on the brink of extinction, had been given a new chance to flourish. Even as celebrations on Earth continued, those who had fought knew that their work had just begun. The galaxy was full of dangers, conflicts, and unknown civilizations. Humanity had stepped into a larger role, one that carried responsibility, risk, and opportunity. But for now, there was peace. The Valkyrie were safe, the Dominion defeated, and humanity had proven that when it fought to protect life, nothing, not even the most powerful empire, could stand against them. And so, the story of the Deathworlders continued. A species born on a harsh planet, tempered by adversity, had reached beyond its stars to save another civilization. They had shown courage in the face of overwhelming odds, wisdom in the use of power, and compassion in the midst of war. The Valkyrie would rebuild, Earth would reflect, and the galaxy would remember, forever, what it meant when humanity answered the call for aid.